What's the most important year for automotive design? Well, in my mind, it's hands down an easy answer, 1955. Hi there, Rick DeBrule, another chapter in the automotive evolution here once again at the Martin Auto Museum in Phoenix. A great collection with more than 170 cars, all of which tell some kind of fun or interesting story about the automobile. And this 1955 Ford Fairlane Skyliner is a fun part of that history. But first, before we talk about this car, make sure you like and subscribe. And in the comments down below, let me know I got it right, what I got wrong. There's always something I get wrong, and whether you remember driving or riding in one of these. All right, before we talk too much about this particular car, I think it's really important that we set the stage and talk about what was happening in the automobile industry in 1955 and why I think that year is so important. Many people, and I'm one of them, consider that year, 1955, a major turning point in automotive style and design. After years of post-war cars built on pre-war engineering, American automakers suddenly unleashed a wave of bold, futuristic styling. The boxy, utilitarian shapes of the late 40s and early 50s gave way to sleek, low-slung bodies, two-tone paint schemes, wrap-around windshields, and lavish chrome trim. It was the first full expression of what we now call jet age design, cars inspired by airplanes, rockets, and the optimism of a country charging into the future. In 1955, nearly every manufacturer, from Ford to Chevrolet to Chrysler, introduced all new models that looked faster, flashier, and more confident than anything that came before. Now, several factors drove this dramatic shift. The United States was in the midst of an economic boom. Suburban life was expanding, and buyers wanted cars that reflected prosperity and progress. Designers like Harley Earl at GM and Virgil Exner at Chrysler led a styling revolution, pushing curves, fins, and color contrasts that captured the excitement of the atomic age. The impact was enormous. The automobile became more than just transportation. It was a fashion statement. It was a cultural symbol. The cars of 1955 set the tone for the rest of the decade and launched what many consider the golden age of American car styling. And this 1955 Ford Fairlane Crown Victoria Skyliner is a perfect example. Plenty of flash and flair. Now, to understand the Skyliner, you have to know where it fit into the Ford lineup. The Fairlane was Ford's brand new top-of-the-line series for 1955, replacing the Crestline as the company's flagship model. Within the Fairlane family, the Crown Victoria was the flashiest of them all, with that signature chrome tiara band stretching over the roof and down the B-pillars, giving it a truly regal look. And just to make it even bolder, Ford decided to add a transparent tinted plexiglass roof panel. Ford called it the Skyliner, and it was like driving a personal window to the sky. Now, this was the second year for the Skyliner. It had been introduced the year before on that Crestline, the one that was the top of the line. And with that acrylic panel, this Fairlane became one of the most distinctive cars of the 1950s, a two-tone, chrome-laden cruiser that turned heads everywhere it went. Ah, but wait, there's more. Ford offered this car in a rainbow of two-tone colors like this. There were pinks, there were aquas, there were whites, there were reds, with color-coordinated interiors that just screamed mid-century modern style. Ford marketed the car as a symbol of modern living, futuristic, fashionable, and fun. In advertisements, they touted it as every inch a queen, pushing the car as a status symbol. Let's walk around and take a closer look at the styling on our 1955 Ford Fairlane. It's a Crown Victoria Skyliner edition, as I mentioned, and to be honest with you, I think it's a pretty bold step forward in terms of styling. When you look at the 1954 Ford, to be honest with you, it's just a little pudgier looking, a little more rounded. Yeah, it seemed nice for 1954, but when this came out in 1955, I think it really changed everything. The angles became steeper. For example, the hood right here, not quite as tall, starting to slope back, which would happen even more as the years went by. And of course, we've got our aircraft here on the front. We lose the bullet or the propeller that was in the center of the Ford grille for the years preceding this. And when you look at the headlights, things changed significantly. These eyebrows, as I call them, stick over the top, give it a much more, well, a faster look to it, a rake to it. And when you look inside, by the way, you'll notice what look like vents inside. These are not vents, they're just painted on. The 57 Chevy would make those real. Then, of course, you get the chrome going down the side. What a beautiful strip of chrome that goes into that dip right down the side. There were three different Fords that you could buy in 1955. There was the main line, that was the base model. Didn't have a lot of bright work. Then you got the custom line. That had a little more chrome down the side, but when you stepped up to the Fairlane, that's when things got a little more blingy. And boy, look at this beautiful section of chrome that comes down, dips right here. The previous year it had been straight with a little bit of a dip into it, kind of stepping down. But now they've actually got a very bold dip right there. A lot more chrome all the way around this windshield. And the windshield is pretty significantly different as well. 1954, it curved, but it ended right about here. For 1955, they wrap it all the way around. So it's that 1950s wraparound style. Here's that big piece of plexiglass we were talking about, and notice how you can look right into the interior, or if you were sitting inside, you could look on the outside. And when I mention that chrome, I think the insignificant thing to talk about as well is that not only did it look great, it allowed for these two-tone paint jobs with the, in this case, the cream up above and the teal or the aqua down below. Just a beautiful color combination. And that's one of the things they were able to do so nicely with the way these were set up. Here, of course, is the crown, the tiara, if you want to call it, that stretches across the top of the car. That's why they call it a Crown Victoria. When you go back to the back of the car, that's when you start to see for the first time fins in the Ford world. Now, Ford never got into fins as much as Chrysler did or General Motors did. But in 1954, they had nothing. It was just a little round section. For 1955, they began to go, well, maybe we need to peak them up just a little bit. They get a little bolder over the next couple of years, but once again, not nearly as bold as what you were going to get in the General Motors or Chrysler world. Things change in the back here. You'll notice this big piece of bright work that goes across the back. Very nice looking. And of course, I love this little element right here. The fact that it had a little piece of plexiglass, just a style touch. A little more slope to the back, a little more, not quite a fast back, but a little more slope to it, a little faster looking. There was a brand new chassis underneath this car. It had a 115.5-inch wheelbase, but the new chassis was stronger. It was more rigid, had deeper side rails, had cross-member reinforcements, also had a wider track. So everything about this car on the inside and the outside, for the most part, was new. And that's exactly what they wanted to show, that Ford was moving into the future. When you open the door and step into a 1955 Ford Fairlane Crown Victoria Skyliner, you are not just stepping into a car. You are stepping into the 1950s dream of luxury, color, and optimism. And the first thing you're going to notice when you get into this car especially is the color. Ford offered the Crown Victoria Skyliner in bold two-tone combinations. The inside, in fact, could match the outside of the car. For example, in this one, it had this lovely turquoise and white. You could also get pink and black, red and white, even combinations with metallic threads woven right into the vinyl. The dashboard was new, but I won't call it radically different. The speedometer rose above the dash, kind of like a half dome. And to be honest with you, it was actually very similar to what they had in 1954, but instead of a chrome strip and an accent down here at the bottom, now you got some gauges. You had a fuel gauge, temperature gauge, oil light, and a generator light right there. The aluminum panel that was at the bottom of the dash was replaced in 1955, so you could get a two-tone paint styling. Also had bolder gauges across the center. And then, of course, there is the iconic Skyliner roof, that tinted plexiglass panel. Turn this into a rolling conservatory. When you sit behind the wheel, the light floods in from above, giving the car an airy, almost futuristic feel. It was really one of the big selling points for Ford, a driving experience unlike anything else on the road. But on sunny days, it could get pretty warm in here. So Ford actually offered these things. They were snap-out panels that just protected a little bit more of the sun and the heat from the outside. Not sure they really worked that well. The seats themselves, well, they were pretty generous, nice and comfortable. And in the back, well, this was beautiful. I mean, it almost looked like a diner in the back. Had this nice fold-out armrest in the center. Everything about this car just screamed that it was more than a car. It was kind of a cross between a diner booth and a cockpit. And the thing you really have to remember about this car is that this was not a luxury car. This was a Ford, right? This was not a Lincoln, this was not a Cadillac, but to have this kind of style in the types of cars that people could actually afford, this really changed everything in the 1950s. It made it seem like everybody had the ability to make a step up, that you were a part of middle-class America, maybe even able to touch those upper levels. This Crown Victoria really captured the optimism of the jet age, a time when the future felt exciting and cars weren't just transportation. These things became fashion and status symbols. Under the hood of our 1955 Ford Skyliner, we have the 272 cubic inch Y block. This engine was introduced just 1 year earlier in 1954, and it was a pretty dramatic shift. You see, before 1954, Ford's V8 was the legendary Flathead, an engine that had powered just about everything from family sedans to hot rods for more than 2 decades. But by the early 1950s, that Flathead design was starting to show its age. Competitors like Chevrolet, Oldsmobile, some of the other companies already moved to more efficient overhead valve engines. Those engines, because they had that overhead valve setup, offered better breathing, higher compression, and most importantly, more power. In 1954, the Y block was brought in to save the day. Now, it got its nickname from the shape of its deep skirted block. You see, the sides of the block actually extended down below the crankshaft center line, so it formed a sort of sturdy Y-shaped structure. Now, this design made the block rigid and durable, which was ideal for the higher compression ratios and the power levels that drivers were starting to demand. By 1955, the 272 cubic inch version became Ford's main V8 engine. Now, depending upon the carburation and the compression ratio, which one you ordered, the 272 cubic inch engine made between 162 and 182 horsepower. It was smooth, it was strong, and capable of cruising the new highways that were spreading across America. Ford also marketed as trigger torque, high torque engines that gave instant power. The Y-block's architecture was advanced enough for its day: a solid Ford steel crankshaft, shaft-mounted rocker arms, and individual push rods that were driving the overhead valves. The deep block allowed for excellent strength, but it also led to one of its quirks. It had kind of a complex oiling system that made upper valve lubrication kind of tricky if people neglected their maintenance, which they tended to do. Enthusiasts, in fact, still joke that you could spot a worn Y-block driving by the click, click, click of the dry rocker arms. Still, when properly maintained, these engines, they were pretty solid. The Y-block stayed in Ford's lineup all the way through 1964 in their passenger cars. Of course, you could get a 6-cylinder engine in these 1955 Fords. It was 223 cubic inches. Or you could also bump up to the 292 cubic inch Thunderbird V8. But to be honest with you, this engine was really the star of the day, the one that took almost all the sales because people knew exactly what the value was that they could get out of this. Well, despite its beauty and its buzz, the Skyliner's transparent roof was really more of a showpiece than a practical feature. Sales were pretty low. They sold only 2,000 of these in 1955. I think they sold 16,000 Skyliners the year before. And in 55, they sold 1.8 million Fords, so, this 2,000 was just a drop in the bucket. Despite the poor sales, the Skyliner plexiglass would stick around for 56, but in 57, the company would move to a bold new kind of Skyliner, the retractable hardtop Fairlane 500. In fact, you might want to check out our video on the museum Skyliner with the link that's right up there. Now, this car in particular may not have worn the crown for sales, but the 1955 Ford Fairlane Crown Victoria sure wore its chrome and its two-tone colors like automotive royalty.